I'm John Carlevale, hosting this show with two guests. One you recognize right away, Dick August, who is also a host, but today he's going to be a member of the party who's being interviewed, the interviewee. And next to him is Reggie Centracchio, former head of the National Guard in Rhode Island, and just a top-notch human being besides being a military hero. Dick, we're going to talk about the election that we just experienced, and of course Donald Trump is on his way in, but what do you say about his election? Did he receive some kind of mandate from the voters? I mean, what do you make of the fact that he won, and he won significantly?
Yeah, I think not only is it a mandate from the voters, but it might even be considered a repudiation of the 4 years under the Biden-Harris administration. I think the people in this country have sent a clear signal that the extreme movement to the left, the woke movement, whatever you want to call it, is not where most of us are. And they want to get back to a more traditional position for the whole country. And I think Trump knows that he is in his second term. He can't run again. And he's got about, really, in a practical sense, he's got about 18 months to get most of his agenda done. Because at the 18th month, we're going to start thinking about the congressional election that's coming up. The Republicans have more seats in the Senate to defend this time than the Democrats. And then the next 2 years is really his swan song. And most presidents don't get a lot done in the last 2 years of their second term, but we'll see.
And I assume that you're suggesting that if there were to be a shift in the numbers, the power that is his now going in may change.
The power dynamic certainly will. Yes. And I think his agenda is extremely aggressive. Frankly, I don't think he can get everything done that he thinks can be done, simply because you're dealing with an entrenched bureaucracy. I call it the fourth branch of government. And I don't care what department you look at. He said, I'm going to eliminate the Department of Education. Well, that's going to create howls among the supporters, especially the unions. I think the teachers' unions are going to be very upset at that. And that bureaucracy will close ranks against whoever goes in there to try to close the place down. It's a big, tall order to close down a department like that in a very short period of time.
Yes, indeed. And it takes a leadership that has the savvy that would be needed to make contacts in whatever given department it is, and convince the people there that this is going to be an improvement. Why? Let me tell you why, and have 101 reasons why it's going to be that. Reggie, do you want to comment on?
I think I totally agree with Dick's analogy of it. I also want to suggest that there was somewhat, not so much of a mandate, but clearly we have the Republicans in charge both of the House and the Senate for a little while. Mm-hmm. And I think if he's going to accomplish something, it has to be within the first 2 years. But it can't be across the board. He can't bring everything that he said he was going to do within the first 2 years. But it can happen a little at a time. Certainly. I think if people see something significant happening, such as the economy getting better, being able to buy a meal to put food on the table for a little bit less, eggs as an example, take away the chicken flu that's going around right now. But if you look at the general concern of the people, they must be able to put food on the table, enjoy a decent life, put gas in your car, and do the things that we all expect that we can do without taking a loan out to do it. So I think the point is that if he does it in a professional way, and he does it with the backing of the Congress, a little bit at a time, he'll be successful. And that will get him and the Congress into a better position at the congressional considerations 2 years from now.
I think that's very interesting, and I think that that's probably right.
Well, I hope it is.
Because, you know, like Dick said, you know, it's 2 years, short of 2, whatever.
Yeah.
And, you know, what he wants to do is not likely to happen in 2 years. But if he shows the people progress in the areas that they're concerned about, yes.
I just want to point out one thing that we got to keep in mind. The first 2 years of the Trump first term, the Republicans controlled both houses of the Congress. And what happened? We had Paul Ryan, who was basically a policy wonk and didn't really want to be the Speaker of the House, but was. And you had Mitch McConnell, who is another one who is clearly not a fan of Donald Trump. Both of those guys did not do anything to help Trump advance his agenda in his first 2 years in office. And then what happened in the next election? The people began to shrink the margin of victory, if you will, of the Republicans, and the Democrats actually took back the House.
Yes, it's fascinating. The agenda that Trump has is huge. I mean, it's not just a handful of things. It's much more than that. And, you know, the general here raises a question that maybe suggests that, you know, is this biting off more than he can chew? Certainly if we consider the 2-year notion.
You want me to answer?
Sure. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a very good observation, and I think Trump is a businessman, let's face it. Yes, he's a politician, but he's also a very successful real estate developer and ran a reality TV show and a lot of other things. He's a performer, he's a salesman, and very often business leaders will come in and say, oh, we're going to do all of this stuff. But eventually, you have to filter down to what's really important and where can I make a difference. And I think this idea of Elon Musk and Vivek Prasad, the two guys that are going to head up what are they calling it? Department of Efficiency or something?
Yeah, government efficiency.
Government efficiency,
I mean,
yeah.
give me a break. This bureaucracy, I mean, this is a gigantic bureaucracy. And you have to be able to have the support of a lot of different agencies and even outside forces. For example, if you went in and you said, well, I think that the trial lawyer thing is out of control and that we have a legal system where we got to change so that the loser pays legal fees. The trial lawyers are going to go berserk, and they are big donors to all the politicians. So is it going to happen? Well, probably not. But I mean, pick your battles just like you do in a military situation. You're looking at the whole battlefield, but you say, well, where can I make an inroad? Where can I penetrate?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think it's important to recognize, too, as you point out, you know, there's a myriad of things that he suggested he was going to get done. When you're running for office, and I did, so I think I can be a little bit credible when I'm talking about this. You tell people basically what you want to achieve. And hopefully you're touching the people that will react to not everything, but certain segments of what you're saying.
Indeed.
You can't do it all. And I think if people see you doing a little bit for one particular segment of people who put him in office, he'll satisfy them. The next thing is to realize that the economy perhaps is the most important thing for all of us. Whether in fact we start fracking and whether in fact we start drilling would have an effect, I believe. But everybody doesn't really focus on that. They're focusing in on other things that are personal to them. If it hits their pocketbook, they'll pay attention to it.
That's right.
Because it feels good, maybe not.
Yeah.
So you have to be, I think he's smart enough to know that I said all these things, I'm going to try them. I wish he would have used that word try or attempt to make it happen. You can't say I'm going to do this and it's going to happen within my first several weeks of my presidency. People are smart enough to know that that's not going to happen. But if he talks about, look, I'm going to try and I'll do my best to work with the Congress to make this happen, and I need your support to do it, to get back to the people. I can't do this as a president, but the Congress can. So you need to talk to your congressman.
Yeah.
You need to talk to your senators.
You're going to have
Help me
to
do
have
this.
a clout within Congress,
Right.
both houses, to get it done, and hopefully he will have the skill, the ability to make the relationships that need to be made. And if people see, I like that idea. I would support that.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about Trump has made a number of positions known and has selected some people to fill them. And there's been a rush and a pause, and it's all happening in such a fast way. Some of the folks, and this is not unusual for any president, are not people that some of the people in one house or the other particularly like. So let's talk a little bit about that. Dick, you want to start us off?
Yeah. First of all, he's made nominations or recommendations, whatever the correct term is, for every position now except FBI director. So everyone is out there, his cabinet, his department heads, agencies. FBI, apparently there's some infighting within the Trump transition team as to who it should be, but that's the only one that's open. Now, typically what happens is an outgoing administration will extend a courtesy to the people that are being suggested or nominated, and they'll participate in briefings and so forth so that they can get up to speed, even if they're not officially in the office yet. This is just a courtesy. The Biden administration is not doing it. They just aren't allowing it.
That's very interesting.
And the one, we know about the Congressman Gates, who was supposed to be heading DOJ, withdrew his own name, and he had already resigned from Congress, I guess, because there's going to be a special election in Florida to replace him. And the nominee for Secretary of Defense, of course, is under fire. They're rolling all kinds of sexual allegations against him. We could go down the list. There's a lot of them. I frankly don't think you're going to see most of these people in office within 18 months from now. If you look at the history, a lot of this is like repayment for supporting me. Mm-hmm. And if you don't work out, Trump is not the kind of guy that's going to let you sit around if you're not working out.
And I can imagine someone taking a position and then after being in there, let's say a half a year or so, wow, this is more than I ever anticipated. Maybe you need to get someone else.
Good segue into my concern about the nominee for the Secretary of Defense. Perhaps he has some well-deserved understanding of he did go to Iraq and Afghanistan. He made the rank of major, all good stuff. However, when you get to the rank of Secretary of Defense, it goes well beyond that. You have to know exactly who you're talking to across the world. You have to know exactly where the military needs some help. It needs how to use the military, how to make definite worldwide decisions and recommendations to the president. And especially when it results in what do we do when Russia does something really significant, as they have in the past couple of days? What do you do when China is already preparing for a war in 2025, and they've stated that publicly? What do you do when Ukraine all of a sudden can't defend itself anymore? What do you do when NATO starts to push back on and why we're doing what we're doing? All those are big decisions, and I believe that an individual in a position of Secretary of Defense has got to do more than just understand his role in the military at the time. It goes well beyond that. So I think he's probably one. I hope not. Hope he gets in there and does a fantastic job. But likely he'll get in and say, man, what the heck did I get into? because it's going well beyond what I perceive as the experience he's had.
Yeah.
Isn't that the most expensive department?
Yeah,
of all?
800 plus billion a year, and 500,000 more of that employees. And let me just add that I've spoken to 2 other general officers in addition to Lieutenant General Centracchio. One of them happens to be my son, who's retired from the Pentagon after spending a couple of tours there, and they agree with you. This is a bureaucracy that is well beyond the level of a major, notwithstanding his combat record. This is management of a tremendous bureaucracy and a lot of entrenched positions within the Pentagon. It's not as easy as just coming in and saying, okay, we're gonna change all this stuff around, because again, you're going to deal with a bureaucracy that's entrenched, and guess what? We'll just wait you out.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, part of what the president-elect is saying, he's going to eliminate a lot of the bureaucracy that's been there for years and years. I think that would be a mistake. You wouldn't have the expertise that you had for several years. And I'm not suggesting that people should be there for their whole life and not have any ability to bring new people in with new ideas. But when you're dealing with, as Dick puts it so eloquently, this is the biggest bureaucracy we have, but it's also the most important one we have. It could mean either the defeat of this country or the success of becoming a winner in a battle. If you look at the last several battles we've been in, we've not been winners. We've been negotiated out of this scenario. The last war we won was the Second World War. We're still at war, allegedly, officially, in Korea. That was only a staying action. And then when you get into Afghanistan, in Iraq, and so on, and all the other smaller areas, we've not come out saying we've been absolutely victorious and gaining what we intended to do. And that's because of the bureaucracy and because of so many different inputs into the decision that a Secretary of Defense has to make. And keeping in mind, this is a republic. The President of the United States does not have the unilateral power, as some people might think. There's a lot of things that need to happen before we can actually launch a war or, God forbid, launch a nuclear weapon. That's not as simple as the President pushing a button. There's a lot of stuff that goes on and a lot of civilian intersection between that decision and actually happening. So he has to understand all that. And I think that's an area that I'm concerned about.
I have a question for you directly. How does Trump's performance early on as president address this concern that both of you have presented here? I mean, if he does the right thing, what happens? If he does not so much the right thing, what happens? It would seem to me that his performance is part of the important message that's going to go out.
Yeah, the message, there's one word in the, that he didn't have in his first term. That was listen. And when you listen to people who should be able to give you some insight into what the problem might be, you need to listen to it.
Indeed.
And you need to be reactive to it, not just fire somebody because they don't say what you want them to say. And I think he's probably come to that point. Hopefully, he'll demonstrate that in this first 2 years. Yeah. But I think that's the biggest thing, was not to listen to those that are making recommendations in a good way. You've got to listen, and then you react accordingly.
Dick, you want to pick up?
No, that's fine.
Okay. Donald Trump talks often about the swamp, and he's going to clean the swamp out. Can it be drained? The fourth branch of government, almost, Dick.
Yeah, as I said, I think the bureaucracy takes on a form of its own, and it's almost a living organism. And it will, these people are career people. They've gone through many administrations, a lot of them. I'm a civil servant, you know, I'm not an appointee. I can wait this out, and that's exactly what they'll do. And sure, you can come in and sit in the corner office and say, we're going to do this, this, and this. You've got to convince the bureaucracy that this is what we're going to do, because if they don't go along with it, they want to protect their jobs. You know, they know I have the book to follow. It's, you know, a sad fact that there was a scene of I think it was a bomb threat or something, and it said only emergency personnel should stay at their desk, and the first thing these people were doing was looking to see if their job qualified as an emergency job, you know, so they have to stay at their desk. And, you know, so that's the bureaucratic mind. I will say this, in my checkered career, I've worked for, at one point for the United States Postal Service. And you never heard more people complain about the job they worked at, but they couldn't wait to get family members to a job at the post office, because the pay is extremely good for a very repetitive clerical type job. And, you know, so, and that's just the way it is, you know?
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about the media currently, because this election seems to have had an impact on the media. And Dick, I know that you have really taken a closer look at that than I have. So what do you have to say about that?
All I can say is that CNN and MSNBC, whose ratings shot up after the first Trump term, because they have for nearly 8 years done nothing but attack Donald Trump. And all of a sudden now both of them are for sale. Their ratings have plummeted, and I think it's an indication that their audiences look around saying, well, gee whiz, you've been saying this, we've been listening to talk about this for 8 years, and guess what? It doesn't seem to have made that much difference. And when you have Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski from MSNBC going down to kiss the ring at Mar-a-Lago and spend an hour apologizing to Trump and trying to get back in his good graces, and Trump is smart enough of showman to realize that this is a, you know, he'll play along with this, but the things that they would say about him on the air leading up to this election, I mean, I don't know. And then they you know, you can see gradually that there's some shifts, creeping in to some of the other broadcasts that I guess I would describe as being less than friendly to Trump. And they're kind of changing very slightly and maybe looking at some things that they kind of let slide before.
Well, over recent years, Dick, at least for me, and I don't think I'm the only one, trying to get the truth about a particular issue or concern has kept me busy going from this station to that channel, to that reporter. And it's almost been like a part-time job. Have either one of you had that experience as well? I'm sure it's not just I.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if, once again, everything we do as a capitalist country, follow the money. If you could follow the money as to who supports those several TV stations and media outlets, you find out that they are, in fact, wanting to stay in business because the people who are watching them believe in what they're saying. Once they don't believe in that, they go away, and so will the business. And I think if you're looking at people now, there's a big competition, as I see it. Mm-hmm. Now, I was brought up back in the 40s and 50s, and we didn't have basically telephones. We didn't have cells. We didn't have all the social media we have now. So there's a battle going on right now between not only the major media outlets, but social media itself. People are leaning more towards social media than they are in the major TV and radio stations.
Or cable.
They're looking at cable. And what they're looking at is their phone in front of them. If they see it on their phone, it's got to be the truth. Yeah. If they look at, not necessarily so, but if they look at MSNBC and CNN, they're recognizing they're pretty far left. And they don't want to be far left. They want to be somewhere in the middle. At the same time, they look at Fox, and perhaps they're a little bit to the right. And they don't want that either. So they're relying on social media to get a different perspective of what they want to hear, and that's the truth. And if they see the truth and somewhere else, that's where they're going to go. If they believe it's the truth, that's where they'll go.
Yeah, and I think it's more belief that it's true rather than being true.
Yeah.
And I've just become weary of trying to figure out, who's telling the truth here, because, come election time, you want to know who's speaking the truth and who's, doing a job on you.
John, I think if what we want is people to report and not editorialize.
Exactly.
Good
And
point.
what has happened in the media is that the media, and it's both sides, but mostly left-leaning Democrat, has begun to say, I'm going to interpret this for you.
Exactly.
I'm not just going to report it, I'm going to tell you what it's about. Now that's different. That's editorializing, and you can be a political commentator on any of these stations, and that's your job. But it's not. You're not a reporter then. You're giving opinions and an interpretation. Your interpretation. People can separate that out. But if you're just reporting the news, you're not supposed to be slanting the news based on some editorial bent. But that's what happens.
The good news is there have been recently a number of new stations that have come in, and like they're swearing that we're going to just give you the facts and not editorialize on them. And I see them growing in who's looking at and getting the information from. It's only less than a handful that I can think of, but it is happening, and I see that as a good thing. Shall we move on, or?
Oh, fine,
I'm ready to move on.
Do we have an hour, 2 hours?
Yeah, we have an hour, and we're about halfway through. Trump has talked about moving all these illegal folks that have come here. The numbers are staggering, and the numbers that are reported, I think, are an understatement. So, Dick, what can we say about the millions of people who are here illegally vis-a-vis what Trump claims he's going to do, and that is move them all out?
Well, I don't think again, this is a bit of campaign rhetoric, perhaps. This fellow that he's decreed to be the czar, border czar, real tough guy, but he has stated, and I think this is the right way to do it, you've got to go after those that are known to be gang leaders or drug dealers or are convicted felons, and have some problem in the country they're coming from. Get those people first and just get them out the door, get them back, send them back where they came from. A lot of times they don't want them back, but guess what? You're going to take them back because we're dropping them off there.
But they're not going to stay here.
That's staying here. So.
And some of those individuals, I have no idea what the numbers are, have committed crimes in the United States of America.
Sure, one just got convicted of murdering a young lady down in Georgia. Yeah. And it turns out that he was actually arrested by the NYPD, and because of the New York City, New York State policy of being a sanctuary, he was released. They didn't turn him over to ICE. ICE was looking for him.
God.
And he heads down there and he ends up murdering this young woman. And this is what bothers a lot of people. It should bother people. We simply can't be an open border. A nation without a border is not a sovereign nation. It's as simple as that. And just as these people, oh, well, these are poor people that just come in here. Asylum does not include, I want to make a better life for my family. That is not the reason for asylum. That I'm a refugee is different than being someone who seeks political asylum. And a lot of people don't realize there are many NGOs, non-government agencies, who have been given billions of dollars by the Biden administration to take care of these refugees. I've often wondered, well, how are they doing it? Why are they? How is this happening? This is what's happening. These NGOs have been set up, and they're making billions of dollars, quote, caring for these refugees. And the thing that amazes me is there are people here from 180 countries. Well, they ain't all swimming across the ocean to get here.
No.
How are they getting here? They're flying in, they're coming in, they're getting here somehow. Who's paying for this? And when they get here, sure, they trek up, and I'm not taking away from the fact that there are people that die on the trying to get here. But when they get here, you see them coming up the road, I'm saying, gee, they don't look dehydrated, they don't look malnourished, they don't look like they're coming up here with raggedy clothes, like they've really been, you know, how is this happening? You know, I don't understand. And then they come crashing through the gates, practically running over the National Guard guys that are trying to keep them out. And we think, oh, this is okay. This is fine.
I think soon we'll be funding all those 180 countries to have them build walls so they can't get back in.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
We'll be funding that.
Sure, we can't.
But
Walls don't work.
I'd like to follow on with what Dick was talking about, and I think there's the word I would like to interject is prioritization. Prioritization for the most significant threat against the security of the state of the United States, and that is to go after those that we already know are out there. Then you take the people who are here, perhaps legitimately in their mind, not here to start any problems for us, but they want to become citizens. There's a process to do that. If they're following that process, then you work with them. But if they're just here and they don't want to hear anything about becoming a citizen, they have to go. So prioritization, I think, is good. I want to interject the thing that seems to be floating out there, that the president-elect is considering using the military to do that. I am absolutely against that. You know, when you do that, you're talking about Germany in 1936 and 37, and that's how they did with their people they didn't want in the country. So I hope that that isn't the case. We also need to understand the difference between the military. The United States military, active military, has what they call a Posse Comitatus Act. You cannot, and this came in right after the Civil War, you cannot use the military to enforce civil law. That's bottom line. Although it's been done, it's not really considered to be legitimate under the law. However, it does not apply to the National Guard. The National Guard work for the states and the sovereign states. But on the other hand, if a governor of the state says we're not going to cooperate, he may get away with that for a while. But the President of the United States can, in fact, mobilize that unit into federal duty, just like they did back in the 60s when, you know, going into colleges by the blacks and other considerations were taking place. You just turn around and say, thank you, Governor. Now you're under the command of the President of the United States. The National Guard is the only unit in the world that has a duality to it. You take an oath of office to the President of the United States and to the governor of the several states. When they conflict, the President has the authority to be able to override that. I just hope that they do not use the military to pull people out of houses and put them in vans and take them away. That's just does not set well with me. On the other hand, I don't have any problem with the military assisting the police administratively, perhaps. I like there over the border. They're not enforcing anything at the border. They're just trying to accommodate the protocol for getting into the United States without using any military force. So I hope that they're able to iron that out and not just say we're going to use the United States military to get the millions of people out of here. That's not who we are as a country. And I hope that we come up with a word prioritization and follow it through.
That's a very interesting presentation that you just made. And I say this especially because it was very good, and it did give us a little clarity as to who does what and when. But it brings up another mind that's going on in this state as we sit here and discuss it, and that is that the governor of Rhode Island and the mayor of Providence have said they don't want any part of this and they're not going to help.
Well, I agree that they said that, but I think too, at least from what I heard with Smiley saying that he wanted to see it unfold. The immediacy of it was not on the top of his mind. I haven't really heard much with the governor, with the exception that he wouldn't use the state police to assist ICE. I'm not sure that that's exactly the way it would happen. I think if they both would look at what the president wants to do on prioritizing the people who have committed crimes to get them out of the country, I think they will probably go along with that. I'm not talking on behalf of either one of them,
Sure.
but I'm just looking at it from my point of view. On the other hand, I do recognize that, and they recognize too, there are ways and means to have you accommodate what the federal requirements would be. If you want to be a sovereign state or a sovereign city, you may very well lose the federal funding for whatever reason.
Yes.
And I think that's possible, that's credible. He hasn't said that, but I think it's certainly a possibility that here's what we want. You don't want to play the game with us, then okay, we're going to have to withhold the federal funding that we give to your state for whatever reason, specifically in law enforcement, I think.
Sure. Dick, you want to comment?
No, I was just going to say, in the history of the United States Army, as the general undoubtedly knows, the Army has been used to patrol our borders. In fact, after the Civil War, that was mostly what they were doing, patrolling our borders and also trying to keep the Plains Indians in check. And we're all familiar with blackjack incursion into Mexico after Pancho Villa, who was a Mexican bandit who had come across the border, and they actually went into Mexico to try to get him. So the military can be used, I think, to patrol the border, not as a police action, but to ensure the sovereignty of the United States of America as a country.
This particular conversation brings to mind the question, and maybe there's more than one, but you know, as we think about these different things, what should be Trump's most important concern, or maybe, you know, name 4 or name 5. What should he be focusing on as he begins his second tour of duty?
Well, I think the first one has to be the economy and the wellness of the American people. They don't look at national security as a whole because it's not threatening them in an immediate way. They're looking at what they can put on the table and what their salaries and whatever their income can allow them to live in a reasonable way. So I think economy has to be number one. When you get off that bit, I think the next has to be on national security, because if you don't take on those things that are threatening us right now, later on you will threaten it, you will meet the threat with nuclear capability. And I hope we never ever get to that. But it's a very possible scenario that if Putin, as an example, has said it, he will, in fact, use nuclear weapons if he has to. I'm concerned about that. One tactical nuclear weapon will set off World War III. There's no doubt in my mind about that.
Yeah,
and when you start lobbing ICBMs against each other, I know Dick and I had a conversation earlier that some would suggest that we can win a nuclear war. I don't agree with that at all.
I don't think there are winners.
Well, there isn't.
Everybody loses.
Well, we're kind of getting ahead of sticking with Trump and his priorities. I think the economy, there was a very famous management consultant who said, priorities are easy, posterior priorities are not, and that is deciding what not to do. But certainly, getting inflation under control is crucial. This printing of money on an endless stream has got to stop, and I think that's why his appointment for the Treasury Secretary is extremely important, as is the head of his Council of Economic Advisors, who are going to be very important. We've got to get this under control. I think, as you mentioned before, General, restoring our energy independence. We were exporting oil.
Yes, we were.
And this dodge that, oh, well, we really didn't do anything. We've got to start opening up the leases again and starting to tap these resources. Especially, I think, we've got to do something. We have a vast amount of natural gas in this country. And not to be able to use it because people are standing in the way of building pipelines necessary is ridiculous. Natural gas is very clean burning energy, and as much as people may be afraid of it, nuclear power is not anything to be afraid of, because the days, we're way beyond this. The new aircraft carriers have 5 nuclear reactors on them, 5 to drive this thing. And they're not putting them in there because they think they're hazardous or something's going to happen. That's an untoward accident. So this idea that we got to shy away from nuclear as a power source is ridiculous, and we've got to start coming to grips with this. And then I think when you talk about security, I think the security against domestic crime is very important.
Absolutely.
I mean, people are getting sick and tired of seeing this. The most recent thing with that former Marine who tackled and subdued the mental patient who was threatening people on the subway, and they're going to prosecute him and let these other guys out the door within 24 hours, and they're giving the people the finger, all these gangbangers from across the border. People are tired of this. And I think in Rhode Island, you know what, I have never found anybody yet who can tell me how many of these illegal people are here.
It's top secret.
It seems to be secret. The best estimate I've seen was 47,000. It cost us a lot of money for these to take care of these people. And the Providence schools are looking for millions of dollars of extra funding. Well, guess why? They have people showing up at school that don't even speak the language. They don't even know if they can read or write, and they're showing up at the door, and they're entitled to an education.
Yes.
So people need to see security. They need to, again, not only can I go to the grocery store and not spend max out my credit card to buy the groceries for the week. Can my family eat? Can I provide a few little extras of life? And can I get a job? That's the other thing. Can I get a decent job at a decent pay?
And some of these things may sound like they're far apart, but the reality of it is that each influences the other and is influenced by the other. And I think that we as Americans need to understand how these things are interrelated and connected. And we just can't say, well, I'm for this and I'm for that, but I'm not. They're all related. Mm-hmm. Everything that the two of you have just mentioned is related in some way or another.
You know, John, I have a constant desire to want to know where the power goes from the windmills off our coast. I don't have the slightest idea. They always say we can take care of 10,000 homes. Where are those homes? Not mine.
No, mine.
Not sure where they go. But when you look at what happened recently with one of the windmills, what happens if a hurricane comes up and takes them all out? Doesn't take much to. When I saw what the blades were made of, it's just a very fine fiber that can be destroyed very easily. Mm-hmm. So, but the point that Dick brings up, certainly we have got to migrate to a sensible approach to nuclear power. We've got to migrate to those resources we have available, such as natural gas and oil, certainly, and morph ourselves away from dependence on oil, basically. We can look at several things that are replaceable, such as I would envision pulling into a service station rather than a gas station, put in the same thing you use for a propane tank, put it into your car with hydrogen. Those things are on the market right now and they're in process. Why can't we push that? Why can't we push things that are so sensible? But it all is based upon who's supporting with money into the lobbyists that go into the Congress.
You know, what you're saying there just brings to mind a personal experience that I had. I have 2 rooms that I added onto my house, and they're electric powered. Those 2 rooms have doubled my electric power cost. There's 8 other rooms. Those 2 rooms have doubled my electric bill. Yeah.
I think the answer to your question about I call them the windmills, whatever, generating turbines, that goes into the grid, okay? Yes. And so sometimes you'll see, we know we have these on land as well, and sometimes you'll see that they're not even running because they don't need them. And if it's not getting enough wind, it's not worth turning the blades on things. I'm involved in a solar generating station, and people think that it's going into a certain building. Well, it isn't. It goes into the grid. And Rhode Island Energy pays us roughly 21 cents per kilowatt hour. But if you look at your bill, gentlemen and audience, look at your bill, and there's a thing called the part of your bill that is related to the generation of electricity. You're not paying 21 cents. You're paying a lot less, even at this winter rates, to Rhode Island Energy, which means that somehow these other sources are being cross-subsidized, because nobody can buy a raw material at 21 cents and sell it for 17 cents.
Right.
I'll tell you, once again, I understand part of what you're saying, not all of it.
That's often the case with me.
Well,
But I had solar panels on my house, still do. And I think that's the best investment that I've made, because I know where the power is going.
Yes.
It's going from there into
your
my
house.
home.
Yep.
Into your house, exactly, exactly.
But have you disconnected from the grid?
No, because
Well,
I need
why
them.
not?
Because I may need them.
That's right. There you go.
And I'm feeding the grid.
Right, because the generating solar power is not reliable.
Well,
Anyway.
we have about 10 minutes
That's
remaining,
it?
believe it or
Oh
not.
my
So
gosh.
maybe we should talk a little bit about the international matters. What impact may Trump make as he takes over that position and begins to interact with people he's interacted with, a number of years ago. But that's a question that burns, I think, in the minds of everyone. So, Dick, you want to start us off with that?
Yes, I heard a term a few days ago that I haven't heard before. It's called Trump-proofing.
Trump-proofing.
Yes, the Biden administration, I'm not saying it's the president, because I don't think the president is really able to comprehend all this stuff. It's people like Blinken and Sullivan, his national security advisor, and others who are really running the show. I think what they're doing, especially in Ukraine, they're trying to create enough international turmoil so that Donald Trump and his administration are going to be so involved in trying to untangle the international mess that's being created that he can't really focus on the domestic agenda that we've been talking about. Yeah. Right now, about 2.5 weeks ago, Secretary of Defense Austin said that the use of these intermediate missiles that we've given them would have no effect on the war. That everybody agrees that Ukraine cannot win. They cannot defeat Russia. And yet we have provided them with these they call them ATACMs, ATACMs, which are about 190-mile range. They are not therefore intercontinental or really even intermediate, but we launched 6 of them because these missiles rely on satellite intelligence that we provide, and our actual troops have to program those missiles. We are not letting anybody else do it. When they say Ukraine has launched them, Ukraine is not launching these missiles. Our American troops are launching the missiles. And make no mistake about it. And similarly, the British are using a similar missile that they have, and they fired them into Russia, into sovereign Russian territory from Ukraine. Now, you and I discussed at a previous meeting a lot about this thing, so we don't have much time to go over it. But this is a situation that can rapidly get out of control. Mm-hmm. And Vladimir Putin did threaten the use of tactical nuclear weapons. He no longer has to do that, because the weapon that was recently introduced, the Oriska missile, is a hypersonic ballistic missile that cannot be shot down, that does carry a multiple warhead, that can hit anywhere in Europe. And he has said that if the United States and Britain continue on our path, that we have missile sites in Poland and Romania right now, anti-missile sites. They are going to be legitimate targets. which puts American troops directly at risk, and certainly the British are in the same place. So, and the allusion to winning the war, a vice admiral who is in the United States Strategic Command about a week ago said right out that the United States is gearing up for nuclear war with Russia, and we think we can win. Now, here's the problem I have with the media. Are we hearing anything about this? Does anybody know what an Ariska missile is or what it's capable of doing? This is a game changer.
I did want to ask you about that. That missile apparently flies at super speed.
Hypersonic.
So that we can't knock it. That's too fast.
No.
Can't be shot down.
Yeah, I don't want to, I don't know this for a fact, but I would suggest that we have the same technology. There's nothing that's out there that each country doesn't have. So I do believe we have the same capability. I used to man the missile site, so I think I have some insight as to what missiles can do and what they can't do. You're right. Perhaps right now we think we don't have the ability to take down a supersonic missile, but I'm not sure that is the case or not. I don't think we're going to open up what we have in order for them to say, well, we can't do this. I do believe that what Dick talked about with the Biden administration, allowing those missiles to be used, did exactly what he's talking about. To put enough fodder out there so they can't concentrate on the stuff in the United States, specifically the economy and all those things that got him into office. Taking care of the country's security didn't get him into office. The economy did.
Yes.
I think one of the things we disagree a little bit about that. I don't believe that any other country has exactly what that Russian missile displayed. I'm basing this on what I'm watching on not American television, but British and Australian especially. The capability it's impossible to shoot down anything going 4,000 to 5,000 miles an hour, because by the time the radar intercepts it, the thing is gone. And it's coming in at such a velocity that even the kinetic energy without a warhead is phenomenal if they want to use it that way. Our missiles were directed, our ATACMS missiles were directed toward a command and control center, which meant that probably Russian soldiers were killed and wounded. The Russians responded by taking out, with one of these missiles, a warehouse that was originally used by the Ukrainians to assemble ballistic missiles when they were part of the Soviet Union. And it was being used by the Americans and the British to assemble these missiles that they fired. One missile launched 36 submunitions, all independently targeted, and completely wiped the thing out. But it was more of an assembly area, so that at the time there was probably no personnel there, but it just wiped it right out with one missile. I think the real problem is, why are we getting so bogged down in this when I think the best thing Trump has said is, I'm going to get these people together. And basically he's going to say to Ukraine, this is the best deal you're going to get. Russia, don't go any farther. And then that's going to bring them to a point where they say, okay, follow the money. The general said, I just want people to keep in mind, the eastern area that is Russian speaking, that whole area that the Russians pretty much control now, is a vast area of natural gas. And ExxonMobil and Chevron have already paid millions of dollars for the leases on that natural gas.
Wow.
Thank you, Burisma and Joe and Hunter Biden, right? On the eastern part of the country is called the breadbasket of Europe. Vast wheat growing areas. BlackRock investment capital, which probably most people haven't heard about, owns millions of acres there. That is why is the United States interest so focused on Ukraine? Follow the money.
Right. I want to add one thing to that too. I agree. It'll be negotiated. You need to give this part to Russia. You need to step out, and the rest of Ukraine is yours. providing you don't join NATO.
Yes.
That will be
That's
the stipulation.
a deal breaker
That
right
is
there.
absolutely on the table. The other stuff, give this part and the war ends. My other concern is who's going to rebuild Ukraine? And we look at a 34, coming up on $35 trillion debt.
Yep.
I can't understand why we give 29 billion here, 20 billion here, another 20. That's all money that's being printed every single day.
Yeah.
And I'm concerned about that. I was listening to something today, ironically. I didn't know we were going to talk about that, this particular thing, but the only way to solve that is to raise the taxes. That's the only way. And if you did that, we got a problem with being pretty darn close to socialism. And that's the scary part.
Yes, indeed.
Well, the other option is to devalue the currency, which is going to be a disaster for everybody.
Yeah,
That's basically what happened during the Great Depression.
right.
You cannot simply keep printing money that has nothing behind it, because at some point people are going to say, I'm not accepting this.
Yeah,
It happened in the Weimar Republic. You had to take
it's
a
like
wheelbarrow full of currency to go buy a loaf of bread.
I mean, I think we're faced with a situation where, it's like when a car runs out of gas. What do? You don't go anywhere.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we are heading toward with our level of indebtedness. And one of the things that concerns me is that we borrow much of the money that we've spent and given away. And what happens when the borrower says, pay up?
Or I'm not going to roll over their debt, like China could easily do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And all we have to say is we're not paying it. Let's go to war. That's the only option.
Yeah.
Well, we just are about at the end of our time here. So let me say this. If you have a last-minute comment that either one of you want to make, please do that.
Well, I just wish that we had more time, because we didn't even touch on what's going on in the Middle East, which is also another powder keg,
Yes.
which can easily get out of hand, and we can be drawn into a regional war that will, again, be very shocking, because remember one thing, China gets 98% of its oil from guess who? Iran. We're going to go in there and fight Iran. What do you think China's going to do? Sit on the doorstep and say, okay, take over, cut off our supply of oil?
Good point there.
Yeah. I think the same thing applies to the many scenarios that are going on in the world. You have Taiwan to be concerned about. You have North Korea to be concerned about. China, as we just, Iran certainly, and you talk about Ukraine. There are many other scenarios that could blossom out just to either join those that they think are going to win and put us in another situation where we're so involved across the world, it's almost impossible to do that. And therefore, and I hate to keep using the term nuclear, much of our response is based upon our nuclear capability.
Yes.
And we don't want a nuclear war. That would be the end of civilization.
Well,
Amen.
gentlemen, thank you so much. This has been a very interesting discussion. I know there's more that we haven't discussed, but we are simply out of time. Dick August, thank you very much. General Centracchio, thank you very much. You have been watching State of the State, and please join us again next time for the next edition of State of the State.